So welcome today to our How Does Motivation Unlock Success virtual boardroom that is being facilitated by HR Recruit and Penny Wood. My name's Jo Thompson and I'm a consultant for HR Recruit. I'm joined today by Penny, who will introduce herself shortly. Penny will help you understand how to create a win-win environment for your team, generating positive behaviours which ignite and inspire renewed motivation for successful results. If you've any burning questions during the session, then please put them into the chat box facility and we'll cover them at the end. I'm now going to hand you over to Penny, who will introduce herself and start the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. You're in the right place if you want to understand how motivation can unlock success so that you and your teams and the people that you work with can get better results. Now, whether you're a seasoned professional, as we come into the new year, and I'm talking to, they've kind of said, oh, everyone's been fired up for the first couple of weeks, but they are starting to notice motivation drop a little because the credit card bills are in, all those awful things that are happening, right? And sometimes productivity levels start to go down. You might be noticing that an individual isn't quite fully engaged as they normally are. Sometimes you can notice that people's behavior is changing, where they used to take all the initiative all the time and they've come back in the new year and they're like, oh, I'm just not interested, right? There are all sorts of things. Sometimes it's around procrastination. They just have difficulty kind of getting started on something new. You've got all that energy to get going at the new year and you can't get people started. Well, how do you create an environment that motivates those around you and what behaviors do you need to help them develop for success? Well, today you're going to get a deeper understanding of that. And we're going to look at all sorts of different situations. And whatever you're dealing with today, right now, whatever reason you showed up, I am going to help you learn more about the importance of a motivation as a tool for to put in your leadership arsenal. I want you to commit to a kind of new mindset for success. And I want you to, I want to shake things up a little bit. I'm going to get you thinking a little bit differently. And this is your time to, turn your phone off, turn it over. If you can't turn it off, turn it over. And just come into the room with me. Okay. You're going to need a piece of paper and a pen or a Word document, whatever you use. It's going to be probably maybe about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. We'll have questions at the end. And for those of you who stay at the end, there will be a free resource for you. Joe will give you details about that at the end of this. And so let's get going. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a business leadership success coach, and I have three strands to my business. I have executive coaching, where I do one-to-one or I go into organizations. I design and deliver leadership development programs. I'm currently working with 100 managers at the moment in a different part of the world. And I also do public speaking coaching. You'll see there at the bottom, I'm a distinguished Toastmaster. That's not someone in a red coat, by the way. It's Toastmasters it's a voluntary global public speaking and leadership organization. And when I was in New York there, very honored to be president of the ex-Twin Towers Club in New York, and I took it to its highest educational level while I was there. So there are two strands to it, and that's why I got into running my own consultancy business. So very exciting there. You'll see an Empowering Girls logo there. That is really important to me. It's a way that I can give back to my local community. So I mentor, in fact, I'm going straight after today's session to a school, and I mentor 15-year-old girls who are not the high performers, not the ones at the bottom, the ones that are in the middle that kind of get lost a little bit. And we go through a mentoring program helping them to work out what they want to do with their careers. So I absolutely love doing it. So it's just something that you do that adds some value. So the other thing is that, I've worked at very senior levels on really massive projects, so I know what it's like to lead in highly volatile, stressful situations. And my goal for this webinar is that, if you want highly motivated people and teams around you, maybe you've noticed that there's some issue around motivation that you've got to tackle. Maybe you don't have the right balance of the environment, or maybe you've come because you want some new strategies and ideas. And the thing is, it's really important that you know where people are in any given point. And what I mean by that is you've got to keep evaluating, you've got to keep doing temperature checks and check so that you can get there before the levels start to drop. And my goal today is to show you, I'm going to talk to you a little bit around the science of motivation. Some of you will know some of it, but a little refresher there. Then I want to look at the type of environment we're creating. And finally, we're going to look at some of the leadership behaviors that we can maybe adapt. Um, so I want to talk about what's been going on, because if you're struggling to keep levels high in at the moment, sometimes in the team or the organization there are a lot of external factors that are affecting people right now. A big one for people in the UK is money. You'll see people having very, very honest conversations at the moment around finances in the home. And there are also often personal issues in the background that people just, they don't know about. And we're not robots, right? We're not. I want you to remember, because sometimes it's very easy to just get driven by that results situation, which I understand, but I also want to think about, be aware about what might be happening. There's also a lot of redundancies. I don't know if any of you who follow me, I did a post a while ago that since a year ago, last November, the HMRC were reporting 250,000 payroll receipts down. Now, that's 250,000 people being made redundant. And I'm know because I'm talking to senior leaders who are coming to me for coaching. A lot of them have signed NDAs because their organization has told them they don't want people out there knowing that they're making redundancies. So, and there's survivor's guilt out there. A lot of organizations are, when they're getting rid of hundreds and hundreds of people, the people who are left behind are feeling that, survivor's guilt. I've been one of those people, actually, when I've been a person left behind and other people have been made redundant. So I know what it feels like. It's a volatile world, lots of things going on. And focus, it makes it harder for people to focus. And I think it's really important that you just step back and really take a look at understanding your people, your team, your managers, the ones that are coming to you at the moment. Why are they coming to you? If they're not, why not? Understand what's going on for them, and then try and link that to any dips in motivation that you can see. Because there are lots of things that I see leaders do when it comes to managing motivation when levels are dropping, but they don't really work. So one of them is where people don't have clear goals, right? They're unsure about what they're working towards. And the lack of kind of growth and development. So, for example, someone's trying to get a qualification approved, but it's just not happening. And they don't see either the organization or their manager or you guys, if you're the person that's approving it, they just don't see them being supported. So their motivation goes down over time. Or it might be that someone's being micromanaged. There's that lack of autonomy, and it can be, I've had that be myself, and it can be kind of really like suffocating, and it impacts trust, and people start to get demotivated very subtly. It's not obvious, it's quite subtle, and it's changes in behavior, but it doesn't have to be like that. So, I really want you to think about that today. And so, in terms of what we're going to look at together, we're going to look at some of understand the theory of motivation, because once you understand that, you'll understand where people are coming from. And there's a tool that I'm going to show you that I'm sure you will know, but I want to show you how I use it with people, because it might be just something different for you to look at. Then I want to look at the environment that you or those around you are creating, okay, because that impacts a lot. And then I want to look at some of the behaviors and some behavioral changes that may need to take place. Okay, so let's get into it. So, strategy number one is all about what drives an individual's behavior at work. Now, let me put this into context with you and share a story with you. I was working for a large organization and they had a major IT upgrade, migrating systems for 1,500 users, right? And it was going to be rolled out sequentially, team by team. And as part of the IT support team, it was my role to find a training provider to create a bespoke training program because these people had to learn this new system. There was no way getting out of it. Now, IT training, right? It's not interesting. It's quite boring. How was I going to motivate them to want to do the training? To attend the training and then get the knowledge that they needed so that when they got back they could use that system on their own, but also that I was going to make it fun. How could I do all of that? Well, I tapped into the internal motivators that people have, right? At a basic level, they just wanted to do their job without all the disruption that a new system brings, okay? And I knew that the 100% people, they wouldn't be interested in the training. But I kind of came into the office and I kind of thought, well, if they come back and it's not set up right, they'll get annoyed, they'll direct their frustration to me. So I'm going to have to make this training interesting. And I'll talk more about what I did a little bit later. But I wanted to introduce you to this well-known theory that many of you will know if you've not come across it yet before, from Maslow. And it's a hierarchy of needs. But what I want you to, when you're looking at it, I want you to think about where, if you've got people that are problem issues at the moment, or people are coming to you, or maybe it's you for yourself, we all feel like, demotivated at times. I want you to think about where you are on that pyramid because it starts at the bottom with very basic needs. Now, if you think about that training program, they look at that Wi-Fi 4, 5G, right? They just want their system to work. And then in the safety needs and for security and protection, that's kind of, that's where people just want in there where they're living. They just want their schools, businesses, emergency services. People that they want basics around them that are going to work. And then when you get into the psychological needs, this shifts to a once the basic level of needs are met. So I know I've got water, shelter, I've got security, community around me, I know what I'm doing. I can then, I've been in the job for a while, I can then start to move up. And the social needs are people, that's where they want to feel a sense of connection, right? They want to, what's this organization? What am I doing? What's my team doing? How are we all connected to each other? That sense of belonging, that sense of being part of a team. And maybe if there's lots of redundancies and people are scattering, maybe that's lost a little bit. So that's why I like to use this to help people think about, well, where am I on this pyramid? And where is somebody else? Or if there's a manager coming to you, well, let's have a look at this together. Where do you think the team is? Or where do you think that individual is? So I think this is a really useful tool you can use because when you start getting into the self-esteem area, that's where your knowledge and your skills and abilities are being recognized. You start to get trusted, and then you end up in that top zone. And I've been in that top zone a lot myself over the years, and then gone right back down to the bottom. So you want to the top zone is where you're reaching your full potential. You're feeling stretched, you're feeling challenged, right? You can see how people would feel motivated to be up there in that zone. but it's sometimes difficult to get them there. And with all the change that's happening at the moment, I bet you'll be thinking about people and you'll be like, oh, yeah, they're moving around all over the place. Now, somebody I used this with in a coaching session was with somebody who had to, unfortunately, they had to make a lot of people redundant and had never done it before. And they came to me and they said, Penny, I don't know how I'm going to do this because this is going to be awful. I know people are going to be breaking down in tears. I have seen it myself in 2008 in the financial crash. I saw grown men, through glass meeting rooms breaking down in tears, kids, mortgages. I know what it's like. And we used this to look at each of those individuals and say, where do you think they are on that pyramid, and what do you think you need to do in terms of how you're talking to them to show them that level of empathy and compassion, because you're giving them bad news, but let's look at it like that. So there's a different way of using it. And another way I'd like to sort of share with you is I was supporting someone who was leading a huge office move in a city where a big buyout has happened, right? Two completely different companies had merged together and they had different cultures. You had, and the challenge for this particular leader was around how are they going to lead the huge change and motivate everyone, first of all, to buy into the merger. They then had to move offices and they were, so the, if I give you the personality, one organization was very casual, shorts, t-shirts, casual. The other one was suited and booted, corporate. One had cube offices, the other one, they both had cube offices, and they were going to brand new modern open plan. Now you can imagine that is a huge, huge change, and there was a lot of anxiety around the different cultures merging, and how would everybody work together. And what we did was we worked out a real strong comms plan. We made sure that we were answering constantly questions. I created a guide for them that showed everybody exactly the things they needed to know. We sold the benefits like showers and car parking and all that, because obviously if it was moving to the other side of town and you were on this side and it was moving to that side, well, you might decide to get another job, right? And that's fine. But it was really interesting to go through that process to motivate people, to get them to, because this was going to be tough. And some people did manage it. They managed it. They were ready. They wanted a brand new trendy office. Some people found it more challenging, and they weren't ready to accept the changes. One of the funny things I can remember is one person said they had Christmas decorations around their cubicle, and they were like, well, how is that going to work in an open plan office? And so it was quite interesting. That was a motivating factor for that person, but would it be in the bigger scheme of things? So very, very interesting. And eventually, after a month of consultation, which I was heavily involved in with that senior leadership team and supporting that leader to get it through, um, we got there. Okay, so I just want you to. I think it's a really good example of how does motivation unlock success. Well, to get that move happening, these are the kind of things we had to do. We had to work a lot to get rid of their fears, their anxieties, so that they felt comfortable when they were ready to move. Now, strategy number two. Let me just have a little drink. Strategy number two is about how you create the right environment for motivation to thrive, right? And in the context of this session, it's about the environment that you're creating, allowing people to thrive and achieve. Are you helping to set up that environment where people feel psychologically safe? They feel emotionally safe. You know, um, can they demonstrate how they feel at any one time, whether that's good or bad? Because remember what I said earlier, people aren't robots. And as leaders and managers, you've got to be able to understand their personal journey. What excites them? What are they passionate about? What do they want to achieve? And if they're not happy, what's that about? And why is it what and what's triggering it? So there will be lots of different factors that you want to be thinking about. And are you allowing them to express all that? We all know though we have those managers that suppress all this stuff, right? And then they just end up with a really unhappy workforce. So you've got to be able to be brave and have very empathetic conversations around that. Are you Do they get the sense that they are achieving something, that they're part of a kind of a wider, a bigger thing? Because remember the pyramid, that's how you'll get them moving up that pyramid. Do they feel part of something? And when I go back to that IT project I was telling you about earlier, I had no choice, right? 1,500 people, I had to transition them into that system. Well, guess what? I thought about what's gonna really help them. Well, this was a city centre location, and the training was going to be about 5 miles out. And I knew the first thing I was going to get was, well, how am I going to get there? Because a lot of people didn't drive. And so I was quite creative and I managed to get budget for a minibus to pick up 20 people every day. It would turn up at the office at 8:30 and I'd be there with my little tick list, ticking everybody off. Yes, on you go. It's like hiding your eyes. It's quite funny. And then off they go and they do the training and come back. The other thing was that the food at the venue was phenomenal. They did home cooked food, right? Now, I know this sounds kind of weird, like what's that got to do with anything? Well, guess what? Those people started, they weren't talking about the training. They were talking about how easy it is to get there. And oh wow, we had a really great lunch. You've got to go for the lunch if you go for nothing else. Right. So what I was doing was tapping into those other sides of motivation. Do you see that? Those internal and external factors that drive motivation. And the training provider said to me at the end of the program, because I actually got a 96% attendance record. Can you imagine that? 96% for an IT training. They said to me, Penny, if we're lucky, we get about 40% of people turn up. We just don't get that success rate. And they actually offered me a job. And it was quite funny because the reason I like it as a story is I want you to think about all the different all the different parts of the jigsaw of a situation, and to take a multifaceted approach to motivation, right? As HR leaders, there are some, hopefully I've given you some ideas to think about with your own teams, but also with the managers that you're having conversations with. Are you talking to them? Well, how's your team at the moment? What's going on? Any notice anything? Have those conversations and reconnect. It's about reconnecting with the individual and giving that kind of empowerment and autonomy. Those people on that training course, they just felt like, wow, I can just show up. I don't have to think about it. There's a bus that's going to take me there. I made it easy for them. And they came in their droves. So I want you to think about the different types of things that you might want to think about for this year for how you're going to motivate the people around you. And in terms of 2026, what's the biggest gear change you think you need to implement for motivation success? How are you ready to get into bold action and create that amazing environment, that emotionally safe, that psychologically safe environment? I want you to write down, what do you think is the biggest gear shift that you might need to make this year? Now, it could be for you. All right. So if it's for you, that's absolutely fine. But it could be, well, actually, I've got three managers over there and I've noticed some issues. So I probably need to go and have a conversation. Like, I want you to get, For me, I'm all about implementation. I'm not into just coming, showing up to something like this, going through it, go, oh, that was very nice, and you walk away, with a fuzzy feeling. No, I want you to get into bold action, right? Because the people that work with me, it's only when they get into bold action, think bigger, think differently, think outside the box, think crazy things. You can always bring it back to reality, but just think differently about the environment that you're creating and about how people are showing up. And I hope it's um, at this point. I just want to ask, actually, you can put in the chat whether this is providing you with more clarity or more questions. Please feel free to put either clarity or questions in the chat because I'd just quite like to see where people are, just out of interest. And while you're doing that, I want to move on to strategy number 3, which is all about understanding more about the behaviors linked to motivation. Oh, here we go. They're coming in. Clarity, questions, clarity, both. Love that. Love that. Lots of clarity. Thank you. Lovely. That's great to see. But as HR leaders, you often see behavioral patterns before other leaders do, right? And this section is about how you can coach and help those leaders to pause and interpret what they're seeing and then respond in a way that drives motivation rather than shutting it down, right? Behavior is information, and your value as HR professionals is to help leaders decode that information. Does that make sense? So, because managers often label behaviors quickly, right? Oh, they're just engaged. Oh, Penny, she's so resistant, or she's really negative, and she just gets on my nerves. They're very quick to jump to those kind of assumptions. But as HR, you want to encourage your managers to treat behavior as a signal, right? Not as a conclusion. And remind them that drops in motivation rarely appear suddenly. They build over time through small, observable shifts. And that a lot of managers are so busy just, delegating and doing, they forget to, I call it look up and look out. They forget to look up and look out to watch what's going on. Behaviors you want to look out for, things like someone, maybe they've started to withdraw from a discussion. They're normally chatting away. They don't contribute as much as they have done in the past. Maybe their energy's noticeably different. But on the flip side of that as well, you might have somebody who is overworking and they're a kind of perfectionist type, and that can be overlooked. So don't forget to overlook that, because just because someone is working like crazy, there might be they might be, they're doing the swan theory where they think they're gliding, but underneath they're like this. So don't for watch out for those behaviors as well. Maybe they become more defensive, or maybe they become irritable. They snap where you wouldn't normally see that. Maybe they miss a deadline all of a sudden, or someone's noticing that the quality of their work is slightly starting to decline. Well, the impact of all of that, if you don't notice that person who's withdrawing, because sometimes it can lead to boredom where they feel stuck in a routine, or they've kind of come into the new year and they're like, oh God, I'm in this same job. I don't want to be here, but I can't go anywhere else. And they feel that kind of, I'm stuck, but they have no sense of purpose. But I want you to get back with them about that. So watch for those behaviors, watch for those subtle comments. Oh yeah, not really doing anything, yeah, just that kind of. So they're just not saying anything, but they're not sharing anything. Not that they don't have to. But if there's somebody who would normally, and then they're just like, nah, nah, not much is happening. Because if you don't keep an eye on it and keep that temperature check, in extreme cases, it can often lead to high levels of stress, which moves to fatigue, which moves to depression, anxiety, feeling of overwhelm, and finally burnout. And you just don't want to see people go in there. Nobody wants to see that. I've been burned out myself in the past. When I was working on that job in New York, when I came back to the UK, it took me about 2 years to get over it. I was on it for 7 years and it was high pressure every single day for 7 years. And I was just like that. It's like, and I just didn't see it. And I got back and I was kind of brain dead for a bit, to be honest. You're working in that highly volatile environment. It's a big pressure. Working there, it was like working at Buckingham Palace or the White House. It was like real big. You got the Under Secretary General of the UN coming to you. You're not, you know what I mean? It's like, it's quite serious. So I want you to be thinking about that, because I don't want you to, I never want to see people have burnout. I never want to experience it again. I nearly did, but I stopped myself because I knew it was happening. But how do you drive that behavior to create high levels of motivation? Well, if you understand a little bit more about how motivation is linked to behavior, don't forget, psychologists have divided motivation into two types, right? Intrinsic motivation, that is internal factors. That's, I do this because I love it, right? I love coaching, I love speaking, I love talking to all of you lot. I love it. And I hope it comes across, right? It's inside me, it's kind of in my blood, right? Then you've got extrinsic motivation. That is where your behavior is driven by external factors. Now, just because you're getting paid and you've got a reward, or because your boss tells you to do something, or maybe you're expecting positive feedback and you didn't get it, that's extrinsic motivation. Okay, so even though let me have a little drink. Sorry. Even though we think that extrinsic motivators like cold hard cash, right, are strong motivators, most research shows that it's not the case. People are motivated by intrinsic motivation, and they're more likely to stick to their long-term goals if they can connect to that inner sense of purpose. So the question to ask yourself as HR leaders is, which of these behaviors do you think managers might be noticing too late? You want to talk to them about what to do before they get to the point where they take action and they want to fix things, right? Because a lot of them, they don't look up and look out, and then they come to you when it's a disaster zone, right? And it's about the manager slowing down before they act, because the most common leadership mistake is moving from straight into fixing, correcting, or managing performance, right? What I want you to do is to introduce the idea of an early pause point where they start to notice changes in the behavior. And I've got a framework that I want to share with you called Observe, Interpret, and Respond framework, as a framework. So, observe is, what am I actually seeing or hearing? Interpret is, what might this behavior be telling me about that person's motivation or their unmet needs? And then respond is around, what conversational support do I need to take before I take action? Okay. And you can help encourage the managers around you to spot those early indicators rather than react to outcomes, right? When it's too late. Um, Look at big organizational events. I'm sure some of you know that you may be about to be making people redundant, right? Because it's happening everywhere. So why it wouldn't be happening with you lot? Who knows, right? But big organizational events, change, uncertainty, mergers, all sorts of different things, departments changing, roles changing, people having to reapply for their jobs, all that kind of stuff. That often triggers these types of gaps. Okay. And then going back to what we talked about earlier, behavioral changes. Are they going back to, so if you're about to um, give some kind of bad news, is that going to make them snap back down to the bottom of that Maslow pyramid, where they're just thinking about um, um, kind of, oh my God, I'm lucky I've got a job. I need to pay the mortgage. Like, where are they? And managers often focus on outputs, whereas I think for you as HR professionals, you see the context driving through those outputs, if that makes sense. Let me share another story with you to explain this a little bit better. Um, I was working with a client that they noticed that one of their team members had started to change their behavior in recent weeks, and they'd seen a bit down, they had no energy, and they kind of lacked motivation. They weren't contributing to team meetings, they weren't collaborating in sessions, and they became quite withdrawn, and it wasn't like them at all. They would usually come in bouncy, bringing in homemade treats, smiling. They had loads of great energy, but something was off. And we worked through the different strategies and approaches together. And this person then went back to the workplace and tried them out. And one day the person came in and they were 40 minutes late, right? And they had been doing this quite a lot. And other people around them had started to notice it. And people were getting a bit annoyed because they kind of seemed to be getting away with it, right? And so this manager kind of knew they had to do something about it. Now, what unfolded was something that they could never have foreseen. Um, and that makes me move on to the interpret. What might this behavior be telling you about the unmet needs that they may have? Now, when they came in late on this final time, um, the the person said, "Let's go for a walk." And this is really key, going for a walk and getting away from the environment, going away from the office. Now, I know people work virtually, so you could have a virtual coffee completely, unrelated to this. But what happened was they went for a walk and they went and sat down and they sat on a bench. And this person started to tell them about a family problem that had impacted their life and their recent routine to work. Now, I can't share the details because it was confidential, but basically, the person was helping out somebody in their family who just had nothing else to do, and they had to help them out, and it meant that they were coming to work every day late. Now, my question is, what would this have looked like if no one had stopped to ask what was really going on? Because when you get to the respond part of the conversation, once the manager had worked out what was happening, they both sat on that bench and they worked out a plan of how to get things back on track. Now, they agreed that this person, because of what was happening, and then the manager understood, they agreed that this person would actually be able to come in late, and they agreed that they would be able to do it for the next month. Okay. Um, and they made sure that they told the rest of the team, look, I've made this agreement with person X. It's only temporary. It's just going to be for a couple of weeks. And, um, you know, nobody asked anything about it, right? But what they could see was at least it was being addressed. What happened with that person is because that manager had taken that empathetic approach, which they weren't really used to doing, they just sat there, listened, and interpreted what was happening. That person made even more effort to get that issue resolved. And actually, they resolved it in 2 weeks, not 4. And because of that conversation, that person exceeded expectations. Do you see that? Because they felt listened to and they felt understood. So I just want you to think about, if you're coaching managers, of your coaching leaders, or you're thinking about situations in your own teams, think about observe, interpret, respond. It's a really easy thing to remember, and I think it really helps you get that way. Um, and I wanted to introduce you to a client of mine that I worked with who tackled a motivation issue in her team. At the time she came to me, she'd had a team member that had only been there for 6 months, but she noticed that her motivation levels had started to decline. She was a new starter, quite young, And she started not to deliver her tasks on time, and there were things missing, and there were kind of errors. And so she came to me to see what we could do together. And when we worked through it after coaching, we she was able to tap into the intrinsic motivators for that individual. And there was a specific reason, which again I can't share. But by being clearer on what motivated that person, she created a bespoke strategy for herself with very specific interventions related to that individual. And over the next 2 months, she had much more regular catch ups with her. She noticed things started to change, that the person got more connected to their work because they had a renewed sense of purpose. They kind of lost their direction a bit, new to an organization, first, second job, didn't really kind of know how to navigate things. And I asked her what she got out of coaching with me, and she said it was being able to work through a whole plethora of issues and get that clarity of thought and focus on a new approach. So I really want you to think about that, because she went away feeling much more confident to tackle the situation instead of letting things fester, which, we all know lots of people do, and then things just get worse. She was able to tackle it head on and get confident about the intervention she was using. And she and also, instead of having, a staff member that might have ended up leaving, she had somebody who ended up being really highly motivated. So again, it's something that I want you to really think about for this year, especially January. It's hard getting people motivated, right? But you have the opportunity right now to aim high, and that's my kind of brand of how I operate, and be committed to unlocking motivation for success. Are you prepared to put in the work when you're speaking to those managers? Are they prepared to put in the work, to understand their people, create an environment where everybody feels motivated and they want to thrive and excel? I'm telling you, I have been in those kind of teams, and it's kind of electric, and I can't wait to get going. And everybody's, and funnily enough, over Christmas, I had a conversation with somebody, and we both said, wow, when we were there, it was like electricity, wasn't it? It was a great place to work. And we had this unique experience that we've never had with any other people in other organizations. So do you want to create that environment, and do you want to be a contribution to those around you so they can thrive and succeed? Because, instead of just thinking about, oh, what are my goals and my outcomes, what about being a contribution? you know, being a contribution to other people. Um, you've got the opportunity to deal with those motivation issues, whether it's in your team, with your leaders. Don't wait until things get difficult. And I hope you've identified some quick wins today for yourself. And you've understood a little bit more about the different levels of motivation, the different types. Maybe you've identified some positive behavior changes or around the environment you're creating. But I've only dipped our toes into the water, so to speak. But if you'd like to have a more in-depth conversation with me about what I've talked about today, or even if your team or your organization could do with some additional support, people use me to come in and deal with specific situations, or sometimes whole teams. Or if you want to understand have a chat around your own leadership challenges. If you get your camera on your phone and you hold up your camera and hold it up to that quick response code, it'll take you straight to my calendar, and you can just put, you'll see when I'm available, and let's just have a chat about it. Understand how I can support you, because that's what I really want to do, and I love doing it, and I get really good results doing it. And that's what it's about, from my side of things. It's about getting good results, but also making sure that you're looking after people as well. I feel, for me, I'm a good person, I want to be, and I want to be that for others. And for those of you who stayed on to the session today, whilst you're doing that, I've got a free guide for you that I've created that sets out everything I've talked about today, along with some of the coaching questions that you may want to ask or you want to use with your team. Joe will give you all the details about how you can get hold of that one at the end of today. Also, I'd like you to connect with me on LinkedIn. Um, Please email me. My website, you see it's there. I've got I send out weekly newsletters, all sorts of things, all sorts of stuff. I'm on LinkedIn all the time. So I hope you've enjoyed today's session. For those of you who need to go, thank you for coming. If you've got any questions you'd like to ask me, I'm happy to come out of the presentation and ask them. But if you're going to leave, I'll say thank you for coming and enjoy the rest of your day. And I hope to see you next time. And for those of you who want to stay on, I'm going to come out of this presentation, stop sharing, and come back to see you all. It's lovely. I can see you now. I can never see people when I present, and it's just, oh, now I can see faces. It's lovely.
Penny, I'll do the close, and then if there's any questions that come up, we can answer the
Of course.
So I'll send out some correspondence to everyone that signed up for the event, and I'll put a post on LinkedIn. So if you'd like a copy of the follow-up information or the recording, then please put a comment against the LinkedIn post. Our next event is on Thursday, the 22nd, so in 2 days' time, and it's called Replenishing Resilience for 2026, an opportunity to reflect, refocus, and restore balance. A link to sign up for that will be included in the email. If anyone's recruiting, we've always also got accountancy recruits, FD recruits, exec recruits, and charity recruit within the group. But I'd just like to say thanks very much, Penny, for your time and effort in putting everything together, and everyone for signing in.